a door handle pulses like a lung beside Frederick Fitzwilliam's trembling hand. Its rhythm isn't mechanical, but organic, slow, wet throb that syncs with the frantic hammering beneath my ribs. The hallway exhales dust and the ghost of carnival grease paint. Faded posters cling to the walls, their vibrant colors leached to ash by decades of neglect. One shows a Ferris wheel suspended over a void, another a clown whose eyes are just dark holes. My breath plumes in the bone-chill air, though the mist outside the grimy windows holds no warmth. Distant thunder rumbles, a deep, muffled growl that never closes the distance, just echoes hollowly in the hollows of the decaying block. Then the foot click-click begins, not from the hallway but deeper from the room beyond the door. A relentless, rhythmic fick-click-click-click, like a typewriter hammering words into stone. It retreats, the sound pulling me forward, each fick-click a tiny nail driven into my resolve. The fick-click-click stops, a silence so profound it hums in my molars. I force my palm flat against the handle. The pulse intensifies, a living thing against my skin, cold and slick. My fingers slip, then grip the cold metal. I turn. The click-click-click resumes, impossibly closer now, a frantic staccato against the silence. The door groans open, a sound like rusted hinges tearing free. I step through. The door slams shut. Not a bang, but a deep, resonant thud that vibrates up through the soles of my shoes, rattles my teeth, and settles into the marrow of my bones. The sound cuts off abruptly, leaving only the echo in my skull. I face a wall. Not a solid wall, but a shifting plane of shadow. Then faintly cold phosphorescence bleeds from the darkness. Spectral handprints. They form slowly, fingers splayed, palms pressed against the void. Their edges dissolve like smoke in a draught, leaving only the faint, sickly green glow. They pulse in time with the handle's rhythm, a sickening mirroring. The air grows colder, sharper, the scent of ozone and whetstone rising. The fick-click stops dead, not a pause. An absolute cessation. The silence isn't empty. It's thick, viscous, pressing in from all sides like the frozen wasteland outside the carnival's crumbling facade. The handprints flare brighter, the green light intensifying, casting long, distorted shadows that seem to writhe. The glow bleeds into the wallpaper, turning the faded carnival scenes into silent, accusing specters. My skin crawls with the cold radiating from them, the sensation of grave soil seeping through my clothes. The silence deepens, becoming a physical weight, a suffocating blanket woven from the absence of the footy click-click-click, the absence of thunder, the absence of anything but the cold, watching glow of those impossible handprints. The light fills my vision, blinding, cold, and utterly silent. The carnival ground is a graveyard of rust and rot, the mist swallowing the skeletal remains of the Ferris wheel like a shroud. My boots crunch over gravel that bites into the soles, each step a deliberate fracture, as if the earth itself resists my progress. The air reeks of damp cotton and old engine oil, a scent that clings to the back of my throat like a curse. The cat watches from the shadows of a collapsed ringmaster's booth, its ribs pressing against the skin like the bars of a cage. Its eyes, black pits framed by sunken sockets, hold something just beyond comprehension, a language of hunger and secrets. The whispers begin as a murmur, just at the edge of hearing, like voices speaking through a door left ajar. My teeth ache with the effort of not listening, the sound vibrating in my skull. The cat moves, a flicker of motion against the decay, its tail a brittle switch of bone. It leads me, not with a beckoning, but with an insistence, a silent command that grates against my nerves. I follow, my breath fogging in the cold, the whispers twisting into words that aren't words, syllables that dissolve before meaning can take shape. The telescope stands alone, its brass tube oxidized to a dark patina, like the skin of a corpse left too long in the earth. I reach for it, my fingers trembling. The metal is cold, almost painfully so, as if it has been drawn from the heart of a glacier. The whispers sharpen, a chorus of voices overlapping, their edges razor thin. I press my eye to the lens and exhale, the fog of my breath clinging to the glass before it vanishes. The stars are wrong. Not absent, no, they are there, but twisted, arranged in patterns that shouldn't exist. They pulse faintly, like embers in a dying fire, and the sight of them makes my stomach clench. The constellations shift when I blink, rearranging themselves into shapes that aren't constellations at all, but fragments of something older, something broken. My vision swims, the cold seeping into my bones, and I realize the whispers aren't just in my head, they're in the sky, woven into the light itself. The cat is gone. The mist swallows it whole, as if it was never there. The telescope lens fogs over, a slow creeping mist that clings to the glass like a second skin. And then, reflected in that fog, I see them two eyes, black and endless, watching me from the depths of the carnival. They don't blink. They don't breathe. They just wait. The telescope's chill lingers on my skin, a phantom frost. The mist, a viscous gray, presses in, swallowing the last vestiges of the carnival's skeletal frame. The air tastes of ash and something else, something like old paper and decay. My boots sink slightly into the damp earth, the gravel yielding beneath my weight with a sigh. A clearing opens before me, bathed in a sickly moonlight that seems to emanate from nowhere and everywhere at once. It's there. A shifting silhouette, a distortion in the moonlight, coalescing into a form that defies definition. It holds books, not bound in leather or cloth, but formed of solidified shadow, their titles illegible, their spines radiating a palpable cold. The air grows thick, heavy, a physical revulsion settling in my gut. It's not just the smell that cloying sweetness of rot then, but a sense of wrongness, a violation of something fundamental. My breath hitches. I try to turn, to retreat, but the ground beneath my feet seems to shift. A tremor runs through the earth, a low groan that vibrates in my teeth, and then they rise. Bookshelves not crafted from wood or metal, but grown from the earth itself, their surfaces slick with moisture, their heights obscuring the moon. They emerge with a slow, deliberate malice, rising like tombstones to enclose me. The gravel crunches under their silent ascent, a sound that grates against the unnatural stillness. The librarian turns, or rather the space where its face should be swirls with smoke. No eyes, no mouth. Just a vortex of grey, an absence that feels more terrifying than any visible horror. The footing click begins. A faint, almost imperceptible sound at first, like a typewriter key striking a ribbon. It grows, accelerating, becoming a frantic pulse in the oppressive silence. Click, 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 click. Each sound seems to burrow into my skull, resonating with a sickening familiarity. I stumble back, my hands outstretched, searching for purchase on the shifting ground. The bookshelves loom, their shadows stretching like grasping claws. The click, click, click intensifies, a relentless percussion against the rising tide of nausea. It's not just a sound, it's a feeling, a pressure against my eardrums, a vibration in my bones. My legs feel heavy, leaden, as if rooted to the spot. The shadow books drift towards me, detaching themselves from the librarian's form. They move with an unsettling grace, their surfaces rippling as if disturbed by an unseen current. Whispers emanate from them, a chorus of voices just beyond comprehension, swirling around me like the mist. They aren't words, not exactly, but fragments of meaning, shards of memory, all laced with a profound sadness. A resonant chime vibrates in my skull, barely audible but unmistakable. I want to scream, but my throat is constricted, paralyzed. The whispers coalesce into a single, overwhelming sensation, wrongnessy. Everything is wrong. The stars, the ground, the air, the librarian. Me, I feel hollow, empty, a vessel. The thought surfaces unbidden, a cold certainty that settles deep within my marrow. The shadow books press closer, their surfaces cold against my skin. The click, 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 click reaches a fever pitch, a deafening cascade of sound. I try to fight, to break free, but my limbs feel disconnected as if controlled by an unseen force. A single, piercing chime cuts through the cacophony, silencing the whispers, freezing the shadows. The bookshelves slam shut, the ground shuddering beneath the impact. I am trapped. The click fades, leaving only the chime, a final, echoing pronouncement. The chime still vibrates, a phantom resonance in the bone behind my eyes. The shadows haven't receded, clinging to the edges of my vision like cobwebs. My legs tremble, a persistent tremor that refuses to still. Then, a movement, a flicker at the periphery. The cat. It emerges from the gloom between the bookshelves, a skeletal silhouette against the sickly moonlight. Its ribs are stark beneath its patchy fur, each breath a shallow rasp. It doesn't pad, it twine glidesy, a silent, unsettling grace. Its tail flicks, a precise mechanical rhythm, a metronome counting down to something I don't understand. A dry, brittle sound like twigs snapping underfoot accompanies its movements. It turns its head, its eyes too large, too luminous. Fix on me. Then it begins. Not a meow, not a hiss, but a series of sounds that bypass my ears entirely, lodging directly within my skull. It is a language, I realize with a sickening certainty, but not one I recognize. It's a grinding, a scraping, like stone against stone, overlaid with a faint metallic hum. Each syllable seems to etch itself onto the inside of my eyelids. Thrumkur. The cat turns and begins to move deeper into the labyrinth of bookshelves, its tail the only visible signal. I hesitate, the memory of the slamming doors and the oppressive silence still clinging to me. But something compels me forward, a force beyond my conscious will. My boots crunch on the damp gravel, the sound swallowed almost immediately by the oppressive stillness. The cat leads me past shelves overflowing with shadow books, their titles still illegible, their surfaces radiating a palpable cold. It pauses before each, its head tilted, as if listening before continuing its silent procession. Each pause is punctuated by the feu de gruf, shishkuta from, Kurt's language, a relentless, unsettling cadence. I feel a pressure building behind my eyes, a sense of being processed, then it stops, before a section of the bookshelves that seems to blend seamlessly into the surrounding shadows. The cat gestures with its head, a subtle movement that somehow conveys instruction. I approach cautiously, my hands outstretched, feeling for the edges of the shelves. My fingers brush against a surface that isn't wood, isn't metal, but something else, something cold and slick, like polished bone. I trace my fingers along the surface, and a symbol appears etched into the shadow wood. It is unlike anything I've ever seen, a complex arrangement of lines and curves that seem to shift and writhe before my eyes. As I focus on it, a resonant twinkpimai echoes through the library, followed by the sharp, precise clunk-clunk of a carriage return. The sound seems to originate from within my skull, vibrating in my teeth. The cat repeats the gesture, pointing to another symbol. Another clunk-clunk. The library itself is typing, I realize with a chilling certainty. Recording, documenting. We move deeper, the symbols becoming more frequent. The chimes and carriage returns a relentless mechanical pulse. The air grows thick, heavy, the smell of decay intensifying. Then we arrive. A hidden alcove, tucked away behind a towering wall of shadow books. Inside, stacked haphazardly on a crumbling stone pedestal, are tablets, cracked ceramic tablets, covered in the same strange glyphs. The cat sits, its luminous eyes fixed on me, a silent command radiating from its gaze. I reach for one of the tablets, my fingers trembling. The surface is cold and rough beneath my fingertips. As I lift it, a soft final thud echoes through the alcove. The clunk of the door's seal reverberates, a final, definitive punctuation mark. The cat's eyes glow brighter, bathing the alcove in an unsettling phosphorescent light. My vision narrows, the library receding into a blurry, indistinct background. All I can see are the cat's luminous eyes and the ceramic tablet clutched in my hand. My view is restricted. The brass telescope is cold against my palms, its lenses fogging instantly in the breath of the wasteland. I exhale, watching the mist curl like smoke, and press my eye to the eyepiece. The stars don't exist, they're wrong. Not the usual pinpricks of light, but clusters dense, shifting formations that pulse with a sickly inner glow. I trace their edges with my fingers, and the fortifine vibrates through the metal, a deep, resonant hum that settles into my bones. My teeth ache with it. The first constellation aligns with the first symbol, the one the cat dragged me to in the library. A jagged line of light, like a fracture in the sky, matching the glyph's sharp angles. I adjust the focus, and the stars rearrange themselves, reforming into something else entirely. A map, not of the heavens but of the neighborhood. The crumbling houses, the rusted-out cars, the carnival midway where the Ferris wheel stands frozen in time, its paint peeling like old skin. The mist thickens, turning to ice midair, and the carnival posters along the boardwalk bleed into gray, their colors drained away. The music box chimes of the midway are silent, but I swear I hear the faintest whisper of a Calliope's tune, just beyond hearing, a chorus of voices that dissolve into static. I trace another pattern. The kamai grows louder, sharper, and the ice spreads, creeping across the telescope's surface. The symbols from the library flash in my mind's eye, each constellation a puzzle piece, each kamai to lie, a lock turning. The neighborhood map expands, revealing cracks in the pavement, the outlines of things buried beneath the snow. A child's sandbox, a dog's collar, a key half sunk in the frost. The power flickers. A surge of static hisses through the telescope, and for a second the stars burn white-hot. Then, darkness. Absolute. The library is gone. The telescope is gone. I'm standing in the middle of the neighborhood, but it's not the one I know. The houses are hollow, their windows empty sockets. The carnival lights are dead, their bulbs shattered, and the mist has solidified into a wall of ice pressing in from all sides. The air smells like ozone and rust. Something moves in the dark. Not the cat, something else. A shape too tall, too thin, its fingers brushing the ice. The spectral handprints flare to life, glowing faintly in the void. They're all around me, pressed into the walls, the trees, the frozen carnival rides. Cold, intricate, alive. A key turns in the dark. The click of it is sharp, precise. The handprints glow brighter, and I realize they're not just marks. They're a language, a map, a warning. The ice creaks, the handprints pulse, and I know with a sickening certainty that I'm not supposed to be here, that I was never supposed to see the stars, that I was never supposed to know. The ice pressed against my skin, a slow, deliberate chill. It wasn't merely cold, it felt intentional, like a hand. I stumbled, the frozen ground slick beneath my boots. The handprints, those spectral etchings, pulsed around me, a silent, frantic conversation I could, understand, yet felt imprinted upon my bones. The quantity resonated, a low thrum in my teeth, a physical manifestation of the dread that coiled in my gut. I needed to understand, needed to find something, anything that explained this wrongness. The library, or what remained of it, was a jumble of splintered wood and frozen dust. Books lay scattered, their pages brittle and black. I knelt, the ice crunching under my weight, and began to sift through the debris. The distant thunder rumbled, a slow, persistent twang rumble that seemed to synchronize with the tremor in my hands. My fingers brushed against something stiff and leathery, a journal, bound in dark, cracked leather, its spine embossed with faded gold lettering, Psychological Evaluation Subject P2. The letters felt strangely familiar, like a half-remembered dream. I opened it, the pages resisting with a dry, whispering sound. The paper was thick, almost like vellum, and smelled faintly of ozone and decay. The handwriting was precise, clinical, a detached observation of my own existence. It began with a description of my reluctance to embrace spiritualism, portraying it as a carefully crafted persona, a pre-programmed response. Reluctancy, the word tasted like ash in my mouth. I'd always believed in something beyond the tangible. Now, the journal suggested that belief itself was manufactured. The evaluation detailed my childhood, my education, my everything. Each event meticulously documented, analyzed, categorized. My memories, once comforting anchors in the storm of my life, now felt like carefully staged scenes in a play I hadn't known I was performing. The thundershriek rumbled closer, vibrating through the journal, through me. A carriage return. Click, click, click. The sound echoed in my head, a mechanical metronome marking the cadence of my fabricated life. Further in, the language shifted. The evaluations became less about observation and more about function. I was described as a sensor, a recorder, a conduit for something else. The spectral librarian. The name sent a jolt of icy fear through me. I was not observing her suffering, I was experiencing it, a living archive of her pain. A small, folded note slipped from between the pages. It was handwritten, different from the clinical script of the evaluations, scrawled in hurried, frantic letters. Narrator is hypnotized, sequence is fixed. The words slammed into me, a sudden, suffocating weight. Fixed-ein, my thoughts, my actions, my very perceptions, predetermined. The cat appeared then, a skeletal shadow slinking from behind a collapsed bookshelf, its eyes twin embers in the gloom, fixed on me with unsettling intensity. It emitted a low hiss, a rasp of fur against frozen ground, and then vanished. The shadow, books surrounding me began to writhe, their pages fluttering like trapped birds. They coalesced, the words forming in the air before me, shimmering in the frozen light. Freedom is the error. The letters pulsed with a malevolent energy, a chilling pronouncement of my fate. My breath hitched in my throat, the click, click of the journal. Pages grew louder, drowning out the thunder. A shadow fell over me, vast and suffocating. It wasn't a shadow cast by any physical object, but a presence, a weight in the air. I turned, slowly, dread pooling in my stomach. The spectral librarian stood before me, a formless silhouette against the icy wall. Her presence radiated a profound sadness, a cosmic weariness that threatened to swallow me whole. The journal pages rustled with the sound of 15 click, click, as she approached. The mirror wasn't a mirror. It was a shadow book, its pages stretched thin as skin, reflecting nothing but the hollowed-out eyes of Finty P2 asterisk, two black pits staring back at me. Pupil, less, endless. My fingers trembled as I pressed against the glass, the cold seeping through my gloves like water through a wound. The reflection flickered, a glitch in the fabric of the image, and for a single suffocating second, my own face contorted. Jaw unhinged, lips peeled back in a silent scream. I recoiled, my boots slipping on the ice, the crunch of frozen ground echoing like a gunshot in the silence. My breath came in ragged bursts, each exhale a ghostly froster against the glass. The air smelled of ozone and something older, something buried beneath the carnival, rotted boards like a corpse left too long in the earth. The click-it of the journal. Pages had warped, now a jagged, metallic scraping, like fingernails dragged across a graveyard gate. It pulsed in my chest, a physical ache, and I clutched my ribs as if I could staunch the sound. The carriage return clunk 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 followed. Deeper this time, resonant, and it wasn't just in my head anymore. It was Twendy there pressing against my sternum, a blunt force that knocked the wind from my lungs. I doubled over, my gloved hands scraping against the ice, and the world tilted. The log entry was tucked beneath the last page, a single sheet of vellum, yellowed at the edges. The ink was fresh, though, too fresh, like blood still wet on parchment. I unfolded it with fingers that no longer felt like my own. The words bled into view, asterisk record the terror, induced the collapse. Asterisk the letters pulsed, the ink shifting from black to a sickly translucent gray, as if the page were alive. My vision blurred, the edges of the text bleeding into the frostbitten air. The click sharpened. Now a serrated blade sawing through my skull, and the clunk came again. Clunk, like a coffin lid, slamming shut. I looked up, and the shadow, books surrounding me twitched, their pages fluttering in a wind that didn't exist. The whispers, always just beyond hearing, surged forward this time, a chorus of voices murmuring in a language that wasn't a language. A sound that unraveled my thoughts like frayed wire. I was a tool, not a man. Not even a construct with a name. The log entry dissolved into mist, the words dissolving into nothing, but the meaning remained, carved into my bones. The cat reappeared then, its skeletal frame silhouetted against the distant glow of the carnival, as broken lights. It watched me, unblinking, its hiss a rasp of dry fur against frozen ground. Its eyes, those twin embers, burned with something like judgment. I wanted to scream, to tear the skin from my face, to be something other than this hollow vessel. But the click held me, the clunk pinned me, and the whispers coiled around my throat like a noose. The spectral librarian's presence pressed against me, a weight without substance, and I knew she was waiting. Waiting for me to understand, waiting for me to break. The cat moved, not with a feline grace, but a deliberate, almost mechanical shift. Its skeletal frame pressed against the corridor, a barricade of bone and shadow against the swirling mist. It wasn't guiding me anymore. The warmth I'd mistaken for direction had been a phantom, a cruel trick of the light. Now, its gaze was a command, a restriction. Stay. The word resonated not as a sound but as a pressure against my skull, a vibration in the ice beneath my boots. It wasn't spoken aloud, but felt a psychic tether tightening around my wrists. The whispers, the chaotic chorus that had been a constant companion, began to converge, sharpening into that single chilling syllable. Stay. The air thickened, heavy with the scent of ozone and something else, the metallic tang of blood faintly as if the very ground were weeping. The carnival grounds warped, not in a sudden, dramatic shift, but a slow, sickening dissolution. The Ferris wheel, once a skeletal silhouette against the bruised sky, melted into a featureless slab of grey concrete. The carousel, its painted horses frozen mid-gallop, vanished entirely, leaving only a patch of ice where laughter and music had once been. Streets I traversed only moments before dissolved into shimmering, featureless plains of frozen nothingness. It was as if the world itself were collapsing inward, folding into a single point of despair. My legs felt leaden, my movements sluggish, as if I were wading through molasses. I tried to turn to break free from the cat's invisible leash, but my muscles resisted, heavy and unresponsive. A dull ache pulsed behind my eyes, a counterpoint to the serrated footy click that echoed within my skull. The clunk returned, a rhythmic hammer blow against my sternum reinforcing the cat's silent decree. The cat didn't run. It simply moved, gliding forward with an unnerving stillness, its bony form casting a long, grasping shadow that stretched and distorted in the unnatural light. Each step seemed to compress the space between us, a silent promise of something inevitable. I recognized the path now. It wasn't a route to understanding, but a funnel, directing me towards a predetermined destination. A horrifying clarity dawned. The cat wasn't a guide. It was a jailer, a warden of this frozen, spectral prison. And I was the prisoner. The realization tasted like ash in my mouth, a bitter confirmation of the log entry's chilling truth. The footy thother induced the collapse. I was a tool, designed to witness, to endure, to enrecorders. The whispers intensified, coalescing into a chorus of voices, each echoing the single word "Stay. Stay, stay." They clawed at the edges of my consciousness, threatening to overwhelm me, to dissolve my sense of self entirely. I fought against it, clinging to the fragile remnants of my identity, but the pressure was relentless. The spectral librarian. She waited. I could feel her presence, a glacial weight pressing down on me, an expectation radiating outwards like the chill of a winter wind. She hadn't spoken, hadn't moved, yet her will was palpable, a force that shaped the very landscape around me. She was the architect of this nightmare, the conductor of this silent symphony of despair, and the cat, the gaunt, skeletal jailer, was her instrument. The click, click, click escalated, a frantic, desperate rhythm, mirroring the rising panic in my chest. The clunk resonated deeper, a death knell tolling within my bones. I wanted to scream, to lash out, to shatter the illusion, but my body remained unresponsive, a puppet controlled by unseen strings. My own will was a phantom, a ghost of a memory. The cat darted forward, its bony form a blur of shadow and ice. It moved with a sudden, unsettling speed, its eyes now burning with the librarian's cold, unwavering intelligence. The path was clear now, the destination inevitable. I was being herded, driven, towards the heart of the darkness. The cat darted forward, its bony form casting a long, grasping shadow toward the librarian. The librarian's silhouette emerged from the mist, like a page torn from a book of forgotten things. Sharp edges, brittle edges, the scent of yellowed paper clinging to the air. Her form was not flesh, not shadow, but something between a storm of ink and static, coalescing into the shape of a woman whose bones pressed too tightly against her skin. The cat crouched at her feet, its ribs like the bars of a cage, its breath a faint thusibilant raspas against the ice. The whispers coiled tighter, a chorus of voices just beyond hearing, their edges sharpening into something like fuffa click, 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 a typewriter's rhythm, a heartbeat stuttering in reverse. I stepped forward, or tried to. My boots sank into the frost, the crunch of ice beneath me too loud, too frunk-rung, like the sound of a nail being driven into wood. The librarian turned, her face was a blank slate of parchment, her lips parted as if to speak, but no sound came. Instead, the air crackled dead, not with electricity, but with something older, something that smelled of burnt copper and damp cellar walls. Her finger extended, not as a gesture, but as a command, a single digit wreathed in the same mist that choked the carnival. The whispers surged, a storm of syllables that pressed against my skull, by map suffering. The words weren't spoken, they were twin-carved into the silence, a demand etched into the fabric of the world. I opened my mouth, but no sound emerged. The words formed in my throat like shards of glass, jagged and impossible to speak. The librarian's finger trembled, not with emotion, but with the weight of centuries, of every ledger ever filled, every pain ever catalogued. The cat's tail lashed, a whip of bone against the ice, and the ground shuddered. Not beneath my feet, but tethered around me, the frost splitting in thin spiderweb cracks that glowed with a sickly blue light. The whispers rose into a crescendo, a symphony of suffering, each note a memory I wasn't meant to keep. The librarian's form dissolved into a storm of keys, 1,000 tiny flint-clicks like teeth gnashing in the dark. The thunder rolled, not in the distance, but 20 a me, a thud 20 thud thud d, that vibrated in my ribs, in my teeth, in the marrow of my bones. The cat's eyes burned now, twin embers in its skull, and the mist coiled tighter, wrapping around my ankles like chains. I fought it, or tried to. My muscles locked, my limbs heavy as lead, my vision tunneling into the librarian's accusing gaze. The ground gave way, not with a sound, not with a scream, but with a scream, but with a terror-jagged rip in the frozen landscape, a wound in the world. The ice split like paper, the edges curling back to reveal the abyss beneath. The thunder through the D1 last time, a final heartbeat, and I fell not into darkness, but into the weight of every ledger ever written, every pain ever recorded, every whisper ever silenced. The cat's final twin hissee was the last thing I heard before. The mist swallowed me whole. The fall wasn't cold. It was the absence of cold, a vacuum where temperature had never existed. I tumbled through endless black, not falling but twindy unraveling, my bones grinding against the silence. Then below, a shape, a typewriter, its keys a stark grid of cold metal against the void. My hands, reaching out in instinct, brushed the keys first, each one a tiny sharp click against my skin, a sound so intimate it felt like a secret whispered against my palm. I landed hard, each key beneath me a separate click, a tiny percussion of agony as my body met the unforgiving metal. The impact sent a fresh wave of minor abrasions across my palms and knees, the sting sharp and immediate against the pervasive numbness. I lay sprawled across the keys, the cold seeping through my clothes, the click of my own landing. Then, a shift, a low vibration traveled up through the keys, resonating in my sternum, the cat. It stepped onto the typewriter, its thin frame a stark silhouette against the dark keys. Its ribs, sharp as broken branches, pressed against its skin, each movement a footy scrape against the metal. Its eyes ignited, not with fire, but with a cold blue light, the light of forgotten languages, of syllables never meant to be spoken. It opened its mouth, and the words weren't sound. They were pressure, a physical force pressing against my skull, a flood of memories I'd never lived but had been programmed to feel. The ache of a child's first loss, the suffocating weight of a locked door, the silent scream of 1,000 unsaid goodbyes. These are your memories, the words echoed, but they were written for me to re-died. The frozen wasteland began to close in, not with wind, but with a slow, crushing pressure. The blackness around the typewriter thickened, the edges blurring into a seamless, suffocating dark. The cat's glowing eyes fixed on me, its mouth moving silently, the words of my constructed past now sealed within the machine. Why map suffering? The librarian's voice carved into the silence, echoed in the memory the cat was speaking. I felt the weight of every ledger, every pain, every silenced whisper, not as a burden, but as the footy foundation of my own existence. I was not experiencing the suffering, I was the record of it. The cat took one final step onto the central keys. Its tiny claws clicked against the metal, a sound like dry bones on glass. Then, it paused. The words in my head ceased. The only sound was the frantic hammering of my own heart, a frantic thud that against the silence. The cat's eyes burned brighter, the blue light flaring, and the typewriter keys beneath me vibrated with a single deep resonance. It was the sound of the machine itself, of the final act, of the clunk, that would seal the ledger. The sound wasn't loud. It was absolute. It filled the void, the silence, the abyss. It was the sound of the last page being turned, of the final entry being made. Clunk. The sound didn't echo. It was the echo. It wasn't a noise in the air. It was the air itself solidifying. The silence becoming a physical thing, a weight pressing down. The cat's words, my constructed memories, my entire being were now the only thing that existed within the clunk. The frozen wasteland closed over the typewriter, over my body, over the sound. The last thing I felt was the vibration of the clunk traveling through the keys, through my bones, into the very fabric of the silent abyss. Then only the clunk remained. A single resonant clunk, absolute and final, the only sound in the world. The cat's words were the sound. The silence was the word. The clunk was the end.